Season 7's 6th episode of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. aired last night, and I, ever the fan of the show, am once again here to break it all down. So I hope you'll join me after the intro. Well, hello there. My name's Jeremy and welcome back to Freeform Disney, where I talk about all aspects of Disney, from the animated movies to the theme parks to Star Wars, Marvel, and Pixar, and the TV shows, and everything else in between. And that is why it's Freeform. And keep coming back every day for new daily content. If you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're watching the newest season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it's time to talk all about Episode 6, also known as Adapt or Die. So who's adapting better, the Chronicoms or our agents? And who is dying? Time to finish off the 1970s, and this time I'll be looking at it by focusing on each of our groups of characters. So here's what happened. First off, unsurprisingly, we're still in 1976, the good old bicentennial, just like we were for the back half of the last episode. And we start off with this super expositional and kinda unnecessary Chronicom scene where our main Chronicom bad guy is busy talking with Sybil, the one who is a predictor and can read the timeline and tell the rest of the Chronicoms what the optimal path is. It just didn't really work that great. I don't feel we needed it and we could have started it a little bit later. But oh well, that's fine. After all, there's a far more interesting interaction between Sybil and Coulson much later in the episode. I will say it is neat to finally see how many Chronicoms there are, just kind of in the background behind that title shot. Although, I do kind of wish the title shot was another really cool, unique one that we've been doing for the older period. They've all been neat so far. This one, it was fine. Alright, getting into the episode. Unsurprisingly, we certainly do get more of General Rick Stoner this time. And as he ever is, he's certainly enjoyable. You heard me last time, and probably the time before, I'm a big Patrick Warburton fan. Love his wry sense of humor. I will have to caveat that we spend a lot of time just trying to convince him that we're the good guys in here. Maybe a little more than we needed to, but it does get a payoff later. Because later in the episode, he gets taken by the Chronicoms who are going to copy his memory over to a Chronicom and steal his face. And then when we beat them and free him, he instantly says, "I believe you." And just the delivery of that line was so spot on and such a wry bit of humor as well in that it helped give some good payoff for all of that trying to convince him earlier this episode and last episode. Loved it. Oh, and later, the end portion for him was talking with May, and May tells him to go ahead and create a cover story and say that it was a hydrogen wave crisis. Now that leads to all kinds of interesting time questions here. Was there ever a real hydrogen wave crisis? We didn't know before, back when it was talked about. Now, if there was an actual hydrogen wave crisis, this cover story seems a little odd, being that it's now coming years later. Especially using it when he wouldn't know. It's a mess anyway. But if not, which is probably where we're going, then we just created a time paradox as we only knew about the hydrogen wave crisis because it came from the past, and then we just gave the idea to the past, although it's a new, slightly later past this time. Try not to think too deeply on that one right there. Yeah. Well, and then we leave off on Patrick Warburton. We might see him later on, but I'm gonna guess this is probably his exit from the show. So he leaves us with a quip about how this'll make one hell of a report. And I am going to miss his dry humor going forward. Definitely love to have him in the show. Yes, indeed. Okay, at the end of the last episode, we talked a lot about, oh no, they revealed their location. And one assumed that meant, okay, they're going to shoot some missiles at them right now, or there's somebody there that can go ahead and take advantage of that. Well, apparently that's not the case at all. Surprising even our agents. Instead, we get this convoluted new trick because the Chronicoms apparently have given S.H.I.E.L.D. the capability to pierce the cloak of a ship if it has revealed its location at some point in time. Don't ask for that to make any sense. It's convoluted and seems a little half-baked. But whatever. So a few missiles get launched at Zephyr 1 because the Chronicoms take control of the computers at the Lighthouse S.H.I.E.L.D. base, and one of those missiles hits and our team repairs the damage. And that's pretty much it, actually. pretty lackluster consequence right there, especially for how much we built it up as if it would be a big thing. But while we're talking about repairing that damage, it did at least give us an excuse to find out what the heck was going on with Simmons. We found out that she designed a biological implant for herself, which she named Diana. Now, apparently it blocks important memories she has to keep from the Chronicoms, namely Fitz's location, and it also gives her all the extra knowledge she has on how to work the time ship. Still no clarity on how she and Fitz did everything in apparently very little time? Maybe we'll get that answer a little bit later in the season still. That said, we did also find out that Fitz is in a place where he can observe all the actions of the Chronicoms, but is also completely exposed. Does he guide our agents by sending updates to the implant in Simmons' head, or maybe something else? Guess we'll have to wait to see on that one too. Now, if you're asking where Fitz is, my guess, the logical spot would be that he's on the Chronicom's ship, right? Completely exposed, but able to observe all of their actions. That sure as heck sounds like the Chronicom's ship. And he's got to be able to observe Sybil of all people too, to be able to see what they're doing and planning. Well, anywho, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. That whole interaction, though, it gave us some great times between Deke, Simmons, and Enoch, as we only got all of this info after Deke walked in on Enoch trying to fix the implant in the back of Simmons' neck. Which didn't go so great for Enoch right there. And it certainly led to Simmons having to try to explain everything to Deke. But yeah, now some great interactions between each of those sets of the three. Yeah, loved it. Well, while all this was going on, meanwhile, Mac and Yo-Yo entered the lighthouse base in a barely thought through plan to go save Mac's parents. It's barely thought through because it was just, let's rush out, we're going to go do it, who cares? Well, in the course of all that, we got lots of nice moments between the group. Comments about Yo-Yo meeting Mac's parents, but not really, kind of, yeah. All kinds of funky stuff. And we got to hear a lot more about Mac's past during it, too. And in the end, we do successfully break them out of the base. And then we find out that they were Chronicoms. Mac's parents were already dead prior to the last episode. So, yeah. Unsurprisingly, Mac was pretty broken up over that. And a little more about that later on. Really makes you question the whole saving them plan in the first place. It's like, oh, what a mess. What a mess. Anyway, how about we jump over to our hostages? Oh, okay, I guess Daniel Malick would take issue with calling them hostages, as it's Quake he's after. And he thinks he's after Sousa too, because he thinks Sousa has something against aging, but Sousa doesn't. Well, during the course of all of it, they take all kinds of blood and spinal fluid and apparently glands, etc. from Daisy, and she's not doing so great after all that. Yeah. But it leads to some great bonding time between Sousa and Daisy. Sousa tells an old war story, and it just really is there for Daisy as much as he possibly can be. And luckily, that also gives Sousa a reason to stay aboard the ship for its next jump in the end. But first, before we get to that, good old Daniel Malick seemingly dies after grafting on Quake's powers and having started to crack his own bones apart. I say seemingly because we don't actually see his dead body, and knowing any show like this, never trust that to mean that a character is dead if you didn't see the bloody body. And actually, even if you see the body, they still might come back from the dead, but you get my point. Not seeing his dead body means he might be coming back in the next timeline with Quake powers. That would be really intriguing. But I won't hold my breath for that one. We'll see. Now on to our last pair of characters in the episode. May and Coulson. A lot happens here for the two of them and for Coulson specifically, and that's why I saved them for last in this discussion. First, we finally get a real relationship conversation between them while they're over in custody. We've certainly had a bunch of conversations between them before now, but not one that really got into it. Coulson talks about how he's really not liking May's attitude, i.e. the not having an attitude, which is her attitude. And really how May is smart enough. Of course she knows that it's not easy for Coulson. And what does he want from her? Maybe validation, something, anything, right? And we talked about how Coulson really didn't ask to be brought back. But he really needs kind of that lifeline there out of May because he cared about May that much, and The problem on the flip side, of course, is that May has had Coulson die multiple times, and this isn't really Coulson, it's just a robot. So how can I care about you that way? How can I worry about you potentially dying again? Heck, let me give you her line. It's, you never die. You always come back. You know how many times I've mourned you? I'm not doing it again. And I'm certainly not doing it for a decoy with a simulated personality. Love that line. So to the core of the problem here between their relationship at this point. Now this led to the revelation also about what was going on with the Chronicoms, about how they adapted, because Coulson at first thought this was May showing emotion, and then realized it was actually mimicking the emotion being seen out of people like Coulson, which the Chronicoms were also doing. And now they were stealing people's memories and identities by uploading their brains, which we saw the possibility for in the last season. And now, after that, they steal the faces, so they can go ahead and mimic that attitude, mimic the emotions, and that's definitely scary right there. But anyway, before jumping more into that conversation between May and Coulson, loved it. Been looking for a conversation where they really dived into their relationship and the issues, especially for each of them, because they really both have their own special issues this season for themselves, let alone the relationship between the two of them. I don't know where their relationship will head from here. I don't know how it's going to go as far as each of them dealing with their own individual issues. I don't know how you deal with not having emotions unless you touch somebody else. I mean, that is just such a mess. And for Coulson having to deal with not being Coulson maybe, but maybe is Coulson. Oy. Gets tricky. But as far as whether Coulson is Coulson, it's going to get a little trickier. Because after May and Coulson head down to the basement, beat some Chronicoms, and then free General Stoner, well, then Coulson heads down to the basement, which actually is apparently the Chronicom ship, and he goes in and talks to Sybil over in that virtual space. And Sybil is just busy answering all of his questions because why not? I have no problem answering your questions, so let's do it. We talk a little about time, but the more interesting conversation comes the next time after a commercial break when we come back to them a little bit later. And this conversation really comes down to why the Chronicoms and not the humans. And the Chronicoms view it all as the fact that they have time. They won't die. Time has no consequence to them, which clearly indicates some kind of great backup, so they're constantly backed up to the clouds, so that way you go ahead and kill whatever body, they're still alive. I mean, that's the only way that they don't die. And Sybil points a real interesting question over at Coulson. You should ask yourself which category you fall into. Yeah, not having the time issue, that's an interesting one there. What does that end up doing to Coulson? What does that end up doing to you as a person if you feel you won't die? And this isn't just the idea of having a giant lifespan, say, of hundreds and hundreds of years. It's knowing that even if you did happen to die in an accident, you still have a backup. Leads to some interesting questions right there. Now, Coulson gets his great little speech and a response back, and we have a whole montage of our team in different places as his speech is going. But he goes ahead and tells Sybil why she is wrong about humans. First, it's about sacrifice. Because while our time is limited, well, that means that sacrifice comes at a real cost. Second, we'll never give up. And third is that, hey, for Coulson, dying is his superpower. Oh, I love that. It certainly brings things full circle for Coulson. I mean, how many times has he died? Even before the show started, he died. And he's died since then, certainly too. Love it. As for the other two differences, talking about the difference between sacrifice, yeah, that really would make a legitimate difference versus someone whose life is finite or that you can have real loss. If you're always going to be backed up, well, it's not the same loss. As for the never giving up, well, that was really just a reference to Sybil thinking that eventually the humans will see, they're outmatched and they'll give up. It's not really a difference per se between the humans and the Chronicoms, except for the fact that Sybil thought it would be. So yeah, no, not giving up either. What are you talking about? And back to 3. So dying is Coulson's superpower, which May thinks so too. And so what does Coulson do? He goes and detonates all those explosives over inside the Chronicom ship, with himself right there. So will his superpower activate and have him die and come back to life yet again? Well, I'm gonna guess that the answer is a yes to that. may certainly think so as well. Coulson thinks so. The show certainly gives us every reason to expect it. My real question, though, comes to, will he lose any time? How recently was he last backed up to the cloud, shall we say? Now, I'm hoping he doesn't lose any time, because that would be a little painful, as some of that last bit of development that he had would then disappear. So there's hoping. I'm hoping he doesn't lose any time. And I wonder if we'll see him just quickly right in the next episode. And also, how will that affect Coulson really to realize that he won't die and he'll keep coming back? I don't know. I just don't know how that one would affect him. And that's going to be something we'll probably be diving further and further into as the show goes. Is he okay with living forever and having no consequence of dying? Not having real sacrifices, as he himself one had said was an advantage of the humans. Which would mean that he certainly isn't one in that sense anymore. Well, anywho, what else is there to talk about? Oh yeah, the ending. At the ending of the episode, Mac is broken up over the death of his parents and having had to fight people who look like them and kill them. I mean, how do you deal with having to push your mother out of an airplane to her death? Well, someone who looks and acts like your mother anyway. Yeah, that's a head trip right there. And even on top of that, well, that means your parents are dead. Yeah, I don't know how long it would take to get over that. And this is a season where our people never get a chance to deal with anything. Because it's just constantly one spot to the next to the next. We get to somewhere, then we quickly have to deal with it, and then boom, we're jumped off to the next time, and we have to deal with that quickly. After all, we're fighting Chronicoms that don't have to sleep, so yeah, we get no rest and no time to process things. Well, as the episode ends, Zephyr 1 goes ahead and jumps forward, and then Mac needs that time that we just talked about you not getting, so he heads off on his motorcycle to go get some air. And Deke ends up going out after him to go check on him. And then it happens. Zephyr 1 all of a sudden is jumping again. And so we have just left Deke and Mac in some other time period. And wow, we finally did it. Been wondering if that would happen for a while. I've been wondering about the possibility of leaving humans behind, rather than just Enoch who won't age, or humans will. So this could be quite interesting what happens and how that makes a difference between them. And heck, talk about things like Mac and Yo-Yo's relationship if Mac just gained years to his age while Yo-Yo didn't. Interesting, funky stuff right here. Interesting. Now, all that said, while all that was happening, and Deke was yelling at Mac and telling him what was going on, and the ship then goes away, Mac looks like he's stuck down in a dark depression, unaware of what just happened behind him. He's completely out of it. Back to trying to process or deal with what he just did. Even though, again, they were Chronogons. It wasn't a bad thing, but yeah. We'll see if we really deal with that. If they jump years in the future, we might just go ahead and treat it as something that already got dealt with in the time period. So we'll see what happens in the future. Now, for my guess on what just happened, I'm guessing it's probably late 80s for Deke and Mac and early 90s for everyone else. That's my guess. Maybe a 2 to 3 year gap at the most. Will I be close to right on that? Well, who the heck knows? If you're one of those people that watches the previews for the next episode, you might have a better idea than me. I try to keep my spoilers down. I don't trust the previews not to reveal more than I want to see. One of those nasty little secrets about who does previews is they're not done by the same people who make the show, which ends up meaning that things that the show creators would never put into a trailer for their next episode sometimes end up in there. Because they're simply meant to get eyeballs on there, even if it gives away all kinds of plot twists that should not be given away. Anywho. Wow, it's going to be interesting going up to next week. See a whole bunch of things come to pass that I've been waiting for to see happen. This episode felt like it definitely dived deeper into our characters than we have in previous episodes, and I loved this one here. Now, I'm so much a fan of that I pretty easily forgive the other issues I had with this episode. This is definitely one of the best of the season. I won't quite give it best, but one of the best. And I'm really looking forward to where these character arcs go from here. We're almost halfway through the season at this point. Wow. Dang. Reaching the midpoint of all these arcs, huh? Whew. And hey, with that, what about you? Did you love the character development in this episode? What year do you think Deke and Mac are in, and when do you think Zephyr 1 is at this point? Let me know down below in the comments. And thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a like, share it with anyone you think will too, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done it already. I'll see you back here tomorrow for another new episode of Freeform Disney. Have a magical day, and may the Force be with you. Always.